Buying legal tech is really about mastering the RFP. That is the time that you're purchasing legal tech is the same time that you need to be planning all of the change management. When you're buying, you need to know how you're going to gain user adoption, prove the ROI. It's not just about, I'm going to get buy-in, purchase the tool, and then I'll figure it out afterwards. You need to have all three solved at the beginning. And I think understanding the RFP is really broken down into three categories, which is why do you need to buy tech? A lot of people rush to buy tech either because they got pressured by kind of the FOMO. You know, you have other people on different teams that are talking about how amazing their life is. Secret here is it's like Instagram, it's all a lie. But really thinking about, do you actually need to buy tech, or is it something that maybe some manual process could clean it up first before you make that decision? And then also think about, what is the cost of buying tech? And when I say cost, I don't just mean the actual dollar amount on the contract. I mean, what is that going to take you in terms of timeline, resources? What kind of burden is that going to place on stakeholders? So are you going to have to leverage engineering resources in your company? Are you going to have to get a headcount to help you with intake into a tool such as CLM? Who's going to build your repository? Do you have time to put in the manual hours? So there's a lot of different layers to the idea of what tech is going to cost you. And then you have to weigh that out against, what do you expect implementing tech will achieve? So if tech is going to cost you all these things, is the ROI on it enough to justify the expense right now? Or are you perhaps at a stage in your company where you're just too small to make that decision? Or is your team too new and too fragile? Or do you guys not have enough budget or headcount to withstand kind of the burden of tech implementation?
I have nothing to add. That is exactly what I would say. I literally have nothing to add. That's usually the only thing I probably will say is that's probably one of the biggest questions I ask vendors is, how do I implement this as the fastest way possible? Fastest way possible, simplest way possible. Mm-hmm. And oh, sorry, continue, Charlotte.
Oh, no, go.
All I was going to, you go first. I'm less important, to be honest with you.
Well, I was going to say, like, to add the human sprinkle to this, it's asking as well your users, like, what is going to help them? What do they need? Like, what are their kind of learning experiences? And just really getting to know
that is so true. And I made that mistake early in my legal ops career, is I rolled out a solution based on what I thought people wanted and what I thought my team would benefit from. And then I did, and then I realized they don't want the same things. They're not excited by the same things I want. They don't need the same things I want. They didn't care about my dream. And that was, like, of course, shattering. So yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn, but it's definitely one that you have to think about, is like, are you actually providing a benefit to your users, or are you just like, are you thinking about what you would be interested in?
That's a really good point. That is a really good point, because if no one's using it, what was the point of buying the tech? So I always ask, how quick can I implement this? And effectively, like, what are the roadblocks? What would be the actual roadblocks? And if someone could be straight up with me and say, look, this is what it's going to take to get to this point. These are, to your point, Maria, these are the people you may need to implement this. You may need another FTE just to manage it. And it definitely helps with the decision. It definitely helps if it's an easier implementation, because then I can quickly go to talking about buy-in, going to my leadership and say, hey, this will take no time. This will take no time. It's a very low cost implementation. We can do it. And that certainly helps with buy-in and getting those tools. But that's one of my first questions I ask is, how quickly can I do this? And how fast, or not how fast, but like, what are the roadblocks? What stops me from doing this today? So anything else I say, I'm stepping over your toes. I think I agree with you both.
No, definitely not stepping on toes. This is my favorite slide of the whole presentation, which is like, obviously we're here to tell you what you should be doing in RFP, but I'm sure many of you sitting on this call have probably already bought a tool. It's just an inevitable part of our industry right now. Our vendors are very, flirtatious, and they know how to do their job. So this slide is of course the, oh shit, I already bought it slide. So what happens if you're tuned into this webinar and you're sitting there going, you guys are not helping me because mistakes have already been made? So Matt, do you want to walk them through kind of how to save themselves?
Acknowledge and validate customer experiences. You have to, oh my gosh, I've been here so many times. It's you have to, well, I mean, I'll say this, like you have to acknowledge that like this is the problem. Like this is I've had it where I kept lying to myself and saying like it's still going to keep working. We're still going to get through. I think I had to, it's almost like a slow burn. And I have to stop and say, this is the problem. This is the problem I'm facing, to kind of reach your point. Like no one else wanted this product, or no one can use it. No one wants to use it. It doesn't help anybody. So validating those experiences, validating the frustration there. Do you want to take reinvest?
Yeah. So, definitely like you said, Matt, you have to be willing to acknowledge not necessarily failure, but maybe misaligned intentions. And then thinking about reinvesting in your foundation, you got to go back to square one and think about kind of if you skipped the phase where, for example, like if I'm buying a CLM and I'm working on I was working on a small startup at Dapper Labs, and we had a G drive that wasn't organized. People were negotiating out of email inboxes. We had really no ticketing or intake methodology, except for we had like a kind of a rough ticketing tool, and we decided to launch directly into a CLM with a very lean team. In hindsight, probably fixing some of the manual foundation would have sufficed and created less change management issues. So thinking about like, should you just start putting things in the G drive in an organized manner, building out naming algorithms, really refining your intake and ticketing? You can use the most basic ticketing tool to start ground one for CLM, contract intake, and then, kind of organizing your approval methodologies and documenting all the processes. If you go back and do that, that will reveal to you the reasons why you should not have bought that CLM or the things that you need to do to fix it. So just go back to square one, start thinking about like the baby steps that you can take, and that will reveal to you maybe why the end state didn't work the way that it should have.